members, we've now gone into public session. So just to remind you that the meeting will be broadcast online and throughout Parliament buildings, and so welcome to anyone who's watching online today. So if mobile phones can be muted, and just a reminder that recording photography is not allowed. Okay, happy to proceed with the agenda. So we don't have any apologies. I say we've just a few joining online today. So just in terms of chairperson's business, I just want to raise two issues. First of all, I just want to send my best wishes, and no doubt those of this committee, to the Nigerian woman and her daughter in South Belfast, and I know there are many others who are subject to unprovoked, vicious, hate-filled, racially motivated attacks, and just want them to know that we're standing shoulder to shoulder with them. And I think this is another indication of why we need the race relations strategy and a lot more investment in that space. So.
Great. Mm-hmm.
And the second one is a story I just want to raise. It's in the media today about issues around events taking place in Ebrington Square. Obviously we were going to try and get up there before recess, but we'll be going shortly afterwards, and there's probably a lot more information behind the scenes, so I don't want to delve too far into it in case there's any legal challenges, but just to say that I think we do need to be looking at how that space that is obviously funded significantly through the Executive Office, how it's being best used to maximise entertainment as an entertainment venue for the city. Okay, members, anybody else want to raise anything at this stage? Happy to proceed.
Whether we should attend if there's something significant happening over the summer, but anyway, in the square.
Yeah.
Rather than visit on a day when it's quiet,
Yes.
But anyway.
Yeah, that's something.
I suppose it's something we could take up individually, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
See what that's like when it's alive. Thank you. So draft minutes, members, are found at pages 7 to 11 of your meeting pack, and if you're content that they're a true record, I'll go ahead and sign them.
Great.
Any suggested amendments or anything people want to know? Okay.
No.
Okay, so in terms of matters arising, just to highlight that the online survey on the committee's inquiry into gaps in equality legislation went live on Monday, and I know that over the summer there's going to be a series of attempts to keep raising awareness of that through social media. I was speaking to the clerk this morning, and he's advised that the first meeting of this with the Equality Commission in September will also have the
Equality Coalition.
Coalition.
CAJ's confirmed. We're just waiting for Unison to confirm they're the joint conveners.
Great stuff. Okay, so that'll be happening. But also this week the emails will be going out to key stakeholders, key organisations in this space to encourage them to make a submission in the summer. Go ahead.
Just during the summer, if there's anything comes up, if the clerk would be happy to let us know.
Yes. Keep us posted over the summer.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we're just going to move on to item 6, the International Relations Oral Evidence Session. You'll find the clerk's brief at page 14 of your pack. Page 16 of the pack, you'll find the International Relations Strategy from 2014, and you'll also find in the table pack the departmental brief that was received this week. Okay, so you're all very welcome. So welcome to the meeting. We've got Tom Reid, who's the Deputy Secretary International and Intergovernmental Relations at the Executive Office. We've got Lindsay Moore, Director of Europe Strategy and International Relations at the Executive Office. And we've got Kerry Curran, who is the Director of the Northern Ireland Bureau at the Executive Office. Aidan Connolly's joining remotely. He's the Director of the Office of the Northern Ireland Executive in Brussels. And we have Andrew Elliott, who's the Director of the Northern Ireland Bureau in North America. And again, he is joining remotely. Andrew, I'm wondering, we're not seeing your face. I'm just wondering, can you turn your camera on or? Good job. That's better. Thank you so much, guys. So I'm wondering who's going to be making. Okay, go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Chair, for the opportunity to come along here today and brief committee members on TU's international relations work. Now, I do have a few introductory lines here introducing the colleagues, but you've already done that, so I'm going to pass
that
and save some time. Okay. Firstly, I do want to apologise to the committee that you only received the written brief yesterday afternoon. Now, recognising that before taking questions, I thought it might be useful to provide a brief overview of our work, drawing out some key points, drawn largely from the written brief itself, but not repeating that.
Yeah,
okay.
I think we've had a chance to read the brief, so if you could just keep your remarks as tight as possible.
I will.
Thank you.
I will, okay. I think the first point, and it's the first important point in the brief itself, is the fact that it's under the Belfast Good Friday Agreement that the duties of FM and DFM are set out in relation to our work in external relations. Now, key thing is it's strictly within devolved competencies. So it's not a role which sets foreign policy, it's not a role which sets the basis of our relations with specific countries or international bodies, and that remains an accepted matter under Schedule 2 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. Now, within those parameters, as a small outward-looking economy, the ability for us to engage internationally to promote what we have to offer, our place, our businesses, people, academic institutions, just by way of example, that is critically important to realising the full suite of the Executive's ambitions to deliver prosperity, tackle disadvantage across all parts of Northern Ireland. And I think it's in that focus that international relations need to be seen. But it's also equally important, I think, when we start to look at how do we build our capability and share our experience in dealing with some of the more intractable, difficult problems we all deal with, whether it's here in Northern Ireland or it's elsewhere. You know, pressing challenges such as climate change, deprivation, how do you deal with an ageing population and the health impacts. So actually looking outwards, engaging outwards, sharing our experience as well is critically important to that. And it's in that context, as the written brief sets out, that our approach, working very closely with a wide range of stakeholders, including other departments and Invest NI, has tended to focus on three broad but interrelated areas. That's inward visits, outward visits, such as those that ministers do, and the work of our overseas offices. The written brief sets out much more information in that regard, but collectively that's all about raising awareness, building relations with a purpose and securing benefit. And I think those first two, about building relations and raising awareness, are a particular focus of our work. And that's both in Belfast through Lindsay's team and also with the three overseas offices. And it's critically important that in opening doors for our stakeholders and creating the conditions and relationships, including at government to government level, that facilitate the work of agencies such as Invest NI and Tourism Ireland, Tourism Northern Ireland, just by way of example. Now, I think it's important to recognise that they're complementary roles here, right? And it's why it's so important that we work together. It's not just about what we do in TEO, even though we're here today to talk to you about what we do in TEO, okay? Now, as I said at the outset, both as a small administration and economy, that ability to engage internationally is going to continue to be critically important to the Executive's ambitions. And I think in that regard, it's important to acknowledge that we do have a very strong base to build on, even though we only have 3 overseas offices. Those offices have come to enjoy unprecedented access to key decision makers at the most senior levels of the world's largest economies. You see that particularly in Washington and in Brussels in the relationships. And we've done that over the years by working very closely with stakeholders, tailoring our engagement to the specific circumstances, and also recognising the fact that there are wider opportunities you get from being based in what are effectively global hubs. The world comes to Washington, it comes to Brussels, it comes to Beijing, so there are many other groups and people that you can engage simply by being there. Now, what we are seeing recently is fairly unprecedented levels of interest in what we have to offer. And that's by looking at the inward visits we've had. I think over the last 12 months has been about an 86% increase in inward visits from senior delegations. And in the last 4 months alone, FM and DFM have already met 14 ambassadors, 1 Prime Minister and a special envoy. And that's alongside a highly successful trip to the United States. That provides a unique opportunity to raise awareness and promote our interests. But if we're looking forward, how do we build on that? We also need to recognise that there are challenges here, and we have to be conscious of those. The simple fact is, reputation is hard won, but it's very easily lost. Okay, so we can't afford to rest on our laurels. The simple fact is, we are also working in an increasingly competitive and crowded space. We're not the only people out there competing for access or competing for influence. We're also operating in a highly challenging fiscal climate with limited resources, so we have to get the best from what we have available. That's why it's critical that we and our stakeholders have a clear understanding of shared priorities, core messages, and that they're aligned to a targeted, ambitious programme across the Executive with our overseas offices and key stakeholders if we are going to maximise that impact with the limited resources we have. That also includes in how we work with our diaspora, the consul and honorary consul network here in Northern Ireland, which Lindsay has been working very hard on, and of course the UK and overseas networks to amplify our voice and our impact, and that's something the overseas offices have been particularly active in that space. That's a key focus of the work that's currently underway to develop a new international relations strategy for the executive. Now, it is intended that that strategy will build on our strengths, support the delivery of the emergent working programme for government, acknowledge the challenges we're facing and the opportunities, and would start to identify the optimal countries and regions for engagement to maximise delivery of those shared priorities. That's set out in the brief, so I'm not going to go into that in any more information. Now, so what I'll do at this stage, Chair, if you're happy enough, is just finish off by once again saying thank you for the opportunity to come along and brief the committee, and look forward to the questions and discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose just as before we really move on from that, and you use the term there, clear understanding, and I think we as a committee would love a clear understanding of what is happening in the 3 overseas offices. So I'll maybe give Andrew an opportunity maybe just to talk about something that he's working on right now, what's in his in-tray. What would we want to hear about in terms of some exciting work you're involved in, and then I'll move on to Aidan and then Kerry. Thank you. Oh, can't hear you.
I'm being unmuted. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up things that I'm working on right now. I have had a little bit of interest from contacts in Toronto about the possibility of a high-level meeting or a visit in the future at some point, and I'm making arrangements to go and engage further in Toronto about that with people who are close to the federal government there. That's one initiative that I think has potentially significant legs. In addition to that, I'm engaging with stakeholders in California, both in relation to film industry issues. So Cinemagic is going out there at the end of the month. And in association with that, I've had an approach just yesterday from an academic stakeholder in San Diego that is interested to engage with First Minister and Deputy First Minister in relation to peace and reconciliation, as well as business opportunities out there. So again, these are things that are, at the very early stages, they're exploratory and so on, but that's the kind of work that's ongoing day to day for the Bureau.
Okay.
We also, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, finish your point, thanks.
No, I was just really going to say, for many people back in Northern Ireland, they get a big focus on the Bureau around St. Patrick's Day, and that's a time when a very significant number of our key stakeholders come out to the US. And my message always is, please engage with us if at all possible at other times of the year, because to be quite honest, we can have time to do an awful lot more for people if they're able to come out, outside that sort of peak season, as it were.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Aidan, please.
Thank you. Now I've been unmuted. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I suppose the Brussels office is slightly different than the other offices in the fact that we have a policy following remit and due not only to the Windsor Framework, but before the framework existed, our membership of the EU. So we have several different remits that we engage with the Commission, with member states on areas of interest, and also we follow that legislative process through the Parliament as well. We have that representation piece representing the views, and although we are part of the executive office, we work with all of the home departments. We provide them with information, we provide them with contacts, and we also provide them with a platform for their work here in Brussels. We also work with the regions to find mutual areas of benefit and mutual areas of work. We've done a lot recently.
Aidan, thank you. I'm just wondering, could you even give a wee bit of specific to like one area of policy that you're working on at the minute, because a lot of that we can read that in the papers.
Yes, okay. So yeah. I suppose one of the biggest things that we're looking at the moment is we've just had the European elections here, and we will have a change in commission. So what we're currently looking at is those engagement plans for August and September when people start coming back here. We're at the sort of crest of a wave at the moment. People know about Northern Ireland, they know about the Windsor Framework, they know a lot of the good stuff, but we're going to see a lot of changes in the Parliament, as we have seen with the elections. We're also going to see some changes in the Commission. So for us, there's a period of re-education that needs done. We don't have a huge amount of resource here, so that means we need to work smarter rather than harder. We need to target people who can help us. We need to look at people who can work with us, should that be the UK mission, the Irish representation, the other devolved governments here in Brussels, or should it be other member states and other actors such as New Zealand, Australia, Chile, etc., who have an interest in what we do. So that's the main piece of work we're looking at the moment. How will we be able to engage in a way that suits all the needs of Northern Ireland when the new Parliament and new Commission come into force?
Thank you, Aidan. Go ahead, Kerry.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've been in post all of 5 weeks, so actually a lot of my time for these past few weeks is actually developing the strategy and work plan for China and Asia Pacific. So really investigating what we've done so far in terms of what we've achieved economically through educational links between our main universities, and also engaging with our local authorities in terms of their outreach into China and cooperation with China to see how our office overseas can really support during this coming year. Very specifically though, I've got 2 staff out in the Beijing office, and we are at the moment supporting an Ulster University visits of students out to the region, really helping to support the long-standing links between China and Ulster University at Hubei University. I've also been meeting with businesses who have been seeking to understand how best to get into the China market. So, and as part of that, I'm engaging with Invest NI and at a policy level with Department for the Economy to ensure that the work that we do in the Beijing office aligns with what other departments, be that DERA, DFE, Department for the Communities, Department for Justice, are actually hoping to achieve in that space, so that the work plan going forward helps us to deliver across government in a team NICS approach rather than it being a standalone. And I think that's really what my colleagues out in Washington and Brussels are doing also.
Okay, thank you. Just for you, Tom. So I think in the paper there you talked about the ministers will consider an early draft strategy outline. So has that draft been drafted, and is the draft with the ministers?
The simple answer to that is no. At this moment in time, there has been some work and some discussions around what would an outline strategy look like, and I might ask Lindsay to add some information onto that. What would your kind of key priorities, emerging themes might be from that strategy, and some information on that set out in the written brief. One of the key challenges here is the fact, you go back to what's the point in international relations, what are we trying to achieve? And given the challenge we're going to have to be very, very clear as specifically what do we want to do in that international field, where's it adding value, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve. And that's where the link back into a programme for government, back into your economic strategy, etc., becomes so important. So there's so much work, there's a lot of work that has been done in preparing the building blocks, let's say, for that strategy, but it has to be taken forward parallel, I think, with programme for government. Lindsay, anything you want to?
Yeah, well, I suppose maybe just say that, we are in the process of drafting that for Minister's consideration. We've had some discussions, initial discussions, very high level at the moment, but a lot of the work has been about understanding what our partners as well, what their priorities are too. So I chair a cross-departmental group, so across all of the next departments looking at our international priorities. I also chair a working group with our local government stakeholders and their international officers. So we've been doing quite a lot of work over the last year in terms of understanding where their interests are as well, so that and seeing where are particular areas of potential growth and partnership for them and priorities of other departments. So we really want to take this opportunity, of course, to get the steer from our ministers as well in terms of their priorities. So that's, as Tom said, what we're working on at the moment. We also took the opportunity to have an external evaluation of the old strategy, which was last published in 2014. I should say there were some internal refresh of that, in between times, but that was the last published strategy. And we've had an evaluation of that and undertaken as well a programme assurance review to look at the structures around that, and those recommendations will inform the work of the new international relations strategy as well.
Okay, I read that and way back I actually was involved in market research, and so I understand why a lot of this work had to be undertaken. I honestly do, but is there a point at which you say we aim to have this published by the autumn of 2024, because the councils, as you said, they will have their own cycle of new councillors coming in with their different priorities and Lord Mayors and stuff. Is there a point at which you say enough of the desktop research and discussions with engagements and getting something down on paper that can go out for another round of consultation?
That's the point we're at.
That's the point we're at.
Yes.
So have you set a date then?
Well,
I think I'm happy enough to answer that
yes.
one, yeah. We haven't agreed a date yet with ministers, but I think the time frame, ministers and ourselves, we are in that space, I think, where there is a certain degree of urgency to have a strategy in place. I think the key thing is not anticipating that this is a strategy as in an old style,
Yes.
large strategic piece of work. I think this is a strategy which provides a framework which will bring together a series of priorities across local government, ourselves, businesses, etc. But also I think the work that DFE are also doing and Invest NI, that it's all joined up, and it's back to that point. We are a very, very small region. We have a very small overseas resource. So the clearer we can be on specifically what we're trying to do, what the need is out there, then the more we can work with the likes of the FCDO, DFA, overseas networks, for example, and amplifying that voice. So, as I say, I would expect a certain degree of urgency in being able to confirm the time frame for the strategy, but I can't confirm the time frame here in advance of having that conversation with ministers.
I'll move on. Of other questions, we'll move on. Go ahead, Deputy Chair.
Yeah,
Connie,
thank you very much. Thanks. I have a few questions, probably more for you, Tom. So ahead of this committee, I submitted a written question asking for how much money had been spent on the 3 bureaus. That was due last week, and I still haven't received it. Do you have those figures?
I think there have been figures that have been provided in previously, Lindsay. I'm just going to double check that. But yes, I can get the figures for you. I will check where the AQ is itself. What I can say is that the budgets for the overseas offices have not increased in substantially, I think, in 14 years.
Okay.
And the current budgets for the overseas offices are all less than they were in 2019. Okay, so we are, I mean, I think it's a credit to the overseas offices, and I say this as someone who had done responsibility for them for most of that time, that the impact that they've had in the respective areas and relationships they've developed, they have done with a very, very limited resource.
Okay. But just on that, I've been talking to academics from Queen's recently around international relations, and they were quite sceptical of the Executive Office's approach to it, namely because of the outdated strategy. But they had specific questions about the Bureau in China specifically, and Kerry, I totally appreciate you're very new into this role. So, you know, the Twitter account last tweeted itself in 2019. There's been nothing, the most recent update on the TEO website is from 2017. If you go to the website, northernirelandchina.com, it doesn't exist. How do you promote the work of this office if that's what we're working with, if someone who's looking to engage finds stuff like that online?
Absolutely agree, and that's actually one of the first things that I'm working on, and I've actually put in a bid for additional funding for this. So we need an entirely new website for the Northern Ireland Bureau in China. We need a range of media platforms. So at the moment, as you say, Twitter, and the problem with Twitter is that we had staff based in Beijing due to the restrictions in how you can connect outside of China who were unable to use Twitter. So my plan going forward is to have an interactive or cross-platform. I'm trying not to use the name of the company that I'm hoping to engage.
No problem.
But essentially a platform that will allow us to hold a number of social media platforms within China, but also those that are accessible across Europe as well, because there's no point in us having social media that is only accessible in one region and we can't see what Northern Ireland is achieving in the space, because that doesn't achieve our objectives in terms of raising the awareness and increasing the engagement between Northern Ireland and China to our mutual advantage. So that's absolutely the plan, is to have an interactive website that's accessible both in China and in Europe, to have a number of accounts that are accessible, probably not the same accounts just by the nature of I suppose restrictions on those accounts, but we'll be using the small amount of resources that we have, because we only have 3 staff, by having a platform that actually helps us put our postings and updates out to all of those platforms, whether they're in China or the West, at the same time. So I actually have got really big plans for our social media. And if I can go back to your point, if you don't mind, on Queen's, we've all met very recently in the past week with Queen's, and are engaging with their international team very closely, making sure that we're aligned with and certainly understand what they're hoping to achieve in the region, and seeing where we can add value, because they've got some great connections into China already. The secret here will be, in terms of where we add value, is to looking at where their Queen's do not have those doors opened yet, where a diplomatic presence within the Bureau in Beijing can support them in achieving their long-term objectives. So I think we're all quite aligned on that, and you may well have had that conversation before we've had the opportunity to engage with Queen's very recently.
I think it's probably worth, we did have an action coming out of that, Lindsay, with Queen's as well. I mean, that need to work closer together, that was the whole purpose behind the engagement with Queen's. So, Lindsay, if you want to pick that up.
I think, I mean, I'm sort of interested in, you said it was from an academic point of view. We've been obviously focusing on their international engagement, and I should say we've also met with Ulster University too to discuss priorities. But I'd be very interested to know more about their perceptions, because we don't have access maybe to this research that they've undertaken. But certainly I think that we have worked very hard in the last couple of years to maintain a lot of our international relations, our partnerships. I mean, the offices have been a very key part of that, in maintaining those relationships. We've also had quite, perhaps it's not as maybe as visible to Queen's researchers what we've been doing, but you know, we've had a huge amount of engagement in terms of bringing delegations here to understand Northern Ireland better and to build relationships with them. I should say as well, you as MLAs have been really important role in that too, because I know you've often met with visiting ambassadors and others when they've been here. So there has been a huge amount of work that has been ongoing to build those relationships and get a deeper understanding of where there are opportunities and partnerships. So that's, perhaps we don't have the updated strategy on the website. That doesn't mean there hasn't been a huge amount of work that's been ongoing.
Yeah, I'll just add to that very, very briefly. The main purpose of that meeting in Queen's was to take a step back and look at what are our respective priorities and plans. How can we work together to start reinforcing the benefit, the mutual benefit, and there are a few follow-up actions for engagement with Queen's around this, and University of Ulster.
Just on that, if I can clarify, just for clarification's sake, so I'm not putting words in people's mouths, it was someone conducting research. It wasn't their international relations team that had expressed that to me, and I appreciate it, and I really look forward to seeing the work you're doing. Do I have time for one more? Do you want to move on? Conscious as well, one of the issues with China specifically is there's been reports from the UN, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch about the human rights abuses by the government in that region, and will it be part of the international relations strategy going forward that we are conscious of those and any of the work that we're doing in those regions, and any work that we're doing isn't seen to condone anything that's happening there that is in breach of human rights?
Yeah, I think without wanting to sort of preempt what decisions ministers might take in this area, you are getting into the territory when it comes to concerns around a country's position on human rights. That takes us into foreign affairs, which is a reserved matter. So it's not something that would be appropriate for, certainly for me, in front of a committee to make any kind of point on.
Harry, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Tom, maybe if I could ask you, in terms of the disadvantaged with your engagement internationally, how would you say comparisons could be made to the disadvantaged here?
It's a really important one. I think it takes you back to that point about why is an international focus on that important. I'm going to take the easier part of it first, or if that's okay, which is part of what we're trying to do is raise awareness, and a positive awareness of who we are here. And we actually, I think, in many areas have a really positive story to tell. We're not at the end of a journey by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a very human, very positive story that can be told. I think in terms of disadvantage, it's where it takes you into that relationship between wider executive policy on social issues, economic issues and growth. And I think it's fair to say you can certainly see that within the current Minister's priorities in terms of the economic strategy in the FE, where you're starting to look at things, for example, like regional balance, skills, etc. Now, that means when we go back to our international relations strategy and the various programmes of work that we would be looking to take forward in the bureaus and with partnerships with others, that your economic focus in that is going to have to reflect what are the economic priorities, and that would include disadvantages as part of that. But you know, it certainly, we do work with people who are very open to ideas, working with others in this area where we can improve.
Anything else to add? Or?
Well, really just to add from the economic perspective. So when I'm looking at at the moment, as I say, developing the detailed work plan for China and Asia Pacific sitting underneath the international relations strategy, we are looking at regional balance by considering the relative opportunities in each of the local authority areas where we can support investment, growth, opportunities for knowledge exchange, cultural awareness raising. And really, when I'm out in China, one of the tools in my toolkit, if you like, will be being able to talk about how we have supported the growth of Northern Ireland going through the peace process. That's something that actually really is of great interest out in the rest of the world, and it shines a light on where those areas of imbalance are, and actually helps us to kind of raise awareness of where investment opportunities might actually benefit everybody in terms of our interactions. So it's a complex one, and probably one that we could probably spend a whole session talking about, but it's definitely very front and centre in our minds when we're out in our regions.
I think it's probably worth just reflecting very briefly as well. In a lot of the recent engagement we've had with China, both in Beijing and here with the consulate, one of the areas they've been particularly interested in is our approach to vocational education and pathways into employment. And that certainly, I think we are in the early stages of looking at the priority work programmes, but it's certainly one that both ourselves and China are very, very keen to explore our experience in that.
And maybe just worth adding as well that when we have visitors here, one of the things that we're always looking at is people who have tried to tackle some of the challenges that we have and have been successful in it, and whether we can make connections as well. And I know that was very much evident. We had some deputy ambassadors from the Scandinavian countries recently, and we were able to sort of reflect on some of the successes they've had in some areas as well.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Carol, please.
Thank you. So, Tom, it's really what you said in response to Connie. So even though China, the whole issue around human rights abuses is for the British Department of Foreign Affairs. So, for example, if any country came offering investment here, regardless of what they've done, we're going to consider it.
It's not, to be fair, Carol, it's not really what I'm trying to say on this one, okay? What I am saying is it's a matter for FCDO, and as a policy official in the executive office, it's not really appropriate for me to offer a view on that.
Okay, so no, I just want to get that clear, because I mean, my own view is the human rights abuses in China are well documented in public, but I have problems obviously with aspects of America and Britain at the minute in terms of Palestine and Israel, and I know it's very political and you're not going to respond to it. But in terms of investment, return investment from even the current international strategy, is that something that's more for Invest NI to calculate rather than yourselves?
It is. You've got the Invest NI International Strategy, and Kerry, you probably know more about this than I do, which sets out very, very clear targets. If you look at our work, we'll have a clear rationale for our work, why we're targeting certain engagements, but we don't go after the investment directly. We would be supportive of that, and we would work very, very closely with Invest NI. But a lot of our engagement is into that raising awareness and building the relations. And the easy example personally I could take in that is if you look at the work of the Brussels office, for example, post the referendum on EU exit, where there was a lot of engagement there with businesses, with the support of the UK government, to make sure there was actually an understanding across the board of the situation, the practical situation here.
So that's the point I wanted to make, because for me, I'm just new in this committee, and I became aware of the benefits and the links with the Brussels office post Brexit and then post Windsor framework. And the confusion for me, I thought it was just Invest who went out and done this work, and maybe TO just funded these bureaus. But one of the things I would just like to ask is, so it's whatever priorities each department put forward, it's up to yourselves to articulate that. For example, social value and investment and wealth building, I would like to see those championed more, rather than just, and I'm not saying you're saying this, by the way, you know, we've got a great level of education, but we've got terrible levels of deprivation just come here without any kind of community wealth building. You know, I wouldn't like that message, and I'm not saying you are doing it, but who would be responsible for ensuring that any minister's priorities are articulated as part of any potential investment?
I think this is, I take it back into looking at the strategy and the priorities you have. What do they actually mean?
Yeah.
You know, and what does that mean then for our work programmes? And we would be looking at this, Carol, in a sort of, well, what specifically we do over the next 12 months, the next 2-3 years, whatever it might be. But it all comes back to, what does the executive want to do? When it comes in international relations strategy, you know, one of the points it said is you need to amplify your voice, which means there are so many stakeholders here, we have to get working together. We can't do that by going and saying, right, these are our priorities, you're going to do this, and you're going to, it can't be like that. It has to be a kind of a co-design approach you take to that, a sensible, mature approach. I mean, I take exactly what you're saying there in terms of what you would see as the priorities and the assurances you could get back to that. All I can say is it's stuff we would take back and look at, well, how can those sort of issues feed into both the strategy, but actually the important thing that then sits underneath that strategy, which is the work programmes.
Just finally, Chair, for us, I mean, Brennan and I have got one of most deprived constituencies, and I completely support regional balance. I mean, West Oban has been severely deprived, but so has parts of North Belfast, and we're sitting cheek by jowl with BT1, but yet and all we're outside looking in, and it's not to put investors off, it's just to make sure that the people that we represent aren't forgotten either, and that's the point I want to make. Thank you.
Can I just add to that, if I may, just very quickly, Carol, just to say that when we're looking at the TEO's work overseas, of course, inward investment will be an element of that, and that will be linked very closely with the work that's already ongoing in Northern Ireland. So we'll be linking those inward investments to our key priority sectors where investment is required, because there's a gap in either our capability, capacity, or outward market opportunity in Northern Ireland. So that inward investment, regardless of where it comes from, will be very targeted, will be specific to enable Northern Ireland's economy to grow as a whole. That'll be linked to our city and growth deals, which, as you know, we're quite well dispersed across the north, and so that's one element of it. What we're actually trying to do out in offices in support for the work of DFE and Invest NI is also to significantly increase our export growth. So our exports to China are only like 0.1 billion at the moment. It's like only 1.1% of the UK's exports to China. If we can grow that, we're growing the economy. It's providing more money into our budgets to support deprived areas. So there are, I suppose, a multitude of elements to the work that we do out there that collectively should lead us to a more prosperous place in Northern Ireland that enables us to do better by all of our people.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Claire, please. Claire? Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to hear of the work of the various offices. I note that the NI Bureau you're currently recruiting at the minute, and we don't need to talk about that because I appreciate that's an ongoing process. However, it did sort of give rise to people at the weekend asking me about what the NI Bureau does, and indeed the other offices across the world. And I suppose I somewhat liken your work to that of an embassy or a consulate without actually being an embassy or a consulate. But I suppose really it's difficult for Northern Ireland in that respect because we're somewhat represented by both the British and the Irish embassies across the world, but equally we're officially represented by yourselves. And I suppose it's really just to have a question about where's the limitations of that, but then where's also the opportunities, and I suppose even the connections, because that conversation sort of came from the benefits of being part of that embassy network in the various countries, and that networking and the opportunities that exist with that. And a second question, if I may as well, I will often get constituents who are doing great work in other parts of the world and not necessarily just business. So I sit on the board of an arts group from Northern Ireland, and they often go out to New York and to other parts of the States, in some of their work, and they will ask me about the support that can be offered, from Northern Ireland government whilst they're out there. Sometimes I find it difficult to advise what that support actually looks like. And even from your point of view, they're making connections and networks that yourselves may not be familiar with. So how can we really build on what people on the ground are doing? How do we connect them to you so that you can benefit from it as well as them? And I suppose even just that kind of weird space that you take up, maybe not an embassy, but somewhat an embassy. I just be keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. Thank you, Claire. I'll maybe go to Aidan. Do you want to comment on that first?
Yes, I do. Thank you for the question, Claire. It's very good to see you, as usual. I suppose we try and maximise the opportunities that we have here in Brussels. We talk about the Brussels bubble. So it's not just about the good work that we do with the Commission and with the Parliament and with the Member States. It's about the good work that we do with the UK Mission, who are hugely supportive of us, and the Irish Permanent, who are hugely supportive of us as well. But there's a need for us to have that very specific Northern Ireland stamp on the things that we do. It's very important that we are able to carry forth the innovation and the good work that's going on with our departments. Now, Brussels is a particular case in point because half of our office is our office with our policy guys and our events guys, and I'm really, really lucky that we've got such an amazing team. But the other part is actually called the Northern Ireland Hub. And we have hot desks. We get people coming out from Northern Ireland. And if we just last year, we had 24 Northern Ireland civil service visits. We had 5 departments, 3 perm secs. We've had 3 ministers so far. We've had around 2,000 visitors of 23 nationalities, 17 regions, 25 events, 13 policy events, 12 cultural events, 3 school visits, and 4 university visits. And that's just in the space of a year. The way that we kind of look at this place is it's about, of course, we have the statutory stuff that we do as far as the legislation, monitoring, engaging with the different institutions. But the thing that I'm always proudest about is we have wonderful staff here who can make representation. But if you have people, and we've had women's groups, we have schools groups, we've had arts, we've had life sciences, we've had all different types of people from Northern Ireland come over and be able to engage and open doors that wouldn't be opened for us, or we have opened doors for them. But it really adds to that authenticity of the message that we can give. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't room for us to learn or isn't room for other people to make connections with us. And that's the big thing that we push here, that our door is wide open. If you want to engage with Northern Ireland, we're here. If you're coming from Northern Ireland and you want to make contacts or even to pop in to use the hot desk, then we're here as well. And that part of being not just an office for the Northern Ireland Executive and for the departments, but being a hub for the Northern Ireland diaspora and for people who are coming to Brussels is a key part of what we do.
Andrew, do you want to add to that? Oh, You're muted again. Sorry. Go
I
ahead, try again.
previously, yeah, Aidon's captured an awful lot of that, and I previously worked in the Brussels office and then moved to the Washington office, and each office has its own unique role to perform in the particular context in which it finds itself. And one of the things that I found myself particularly thinking about my work as being about is really building a platform of human capital here that is really extensive and really high level and available for ministers, for senior civil servants, but also for other stakeholders who in Northern Ireland who in some way will be contributing to our programme for government. So working with the arts sector, working very closely with the arts sector. In fact, we had a wonderful performance recently that the Bureau was able to sponsor because we were put in touch with C21, which is a theatre company that was working with both deaf and hearing actors, and they put on a marvellous performance in the Keegan Theatre in Washington, DC over several dates. We've also been promoting Agreement. We've been promoting Good Vibrations before that from the Lyric, and again, working closely in collaboration with the Irish Arts Centre in Hell's Kitchen. Our relationship with the British Embassy and with the Irish Embassy are both really, really fundamental. Those two entities, as it were, create an even bigger network for us, so they can help us achieve more than we would be able to achieve on our own, and we tap deeply into that, particularly as in the case of the Bureau, we have a lot of relationships beyond Washington, DC. We're very active in New York. We're very active in other parts of the US as well from time to time. And to do that, we have to rely heavily on partners. Invest NI is one, Tourism Ireland is another. We're showcasing the Good Friday Agreement, in particular to Irish America, and helping explain that that's back up and running again. The more people that you have on board for that, and the more you can do that in a way that showcases the best of our culture and so on, the more you're doing a good job in terms of public diplomacy, which is essentially what the work of the Bureau is in North America.
Go ahead.
Just to
Karen.
add briefly to that,
Yes,
Claire,
thank you.
I think Aidon and Andrea have captured our work and aspirations for our Northern Irish presence in Brussels, Washington and Beijing very well. I would add that in Beijing there's perhaps an additional layer of support that we can offer, particularly in relation to visits from schools, universities, arts groups, businesses, in that the very nature of operating in and entering into China means that a little bit of diplomatic support is often necessary, not just a nice to do. So that's an additional, I suppose, job of the Northern Ireland Bureau, is to ensure that we provide the right support and paperwork, particularly in terms of letters of invitation, and to help people come in and experience what they've are hoping to go to China for, whether that be business, arts or education. But additionally, in relation to the diplomatic position in China, being able to actually hold that position where we are representing this region and being able to say at a diplomatic level, we're endorsing this support, this activity. It goes a long way in China, and perhaps more so than Western countries, and I think that's a really critical role we need to be on site in China in order to achieve, and I think without that we won't capture the benefits of our relations with China at an education level, a tourism level or a business level, and we want to see more of that, particularly when I get out to Beijing, hopefully from the end of August permanently. There will be a lot more engagement of that on that side of things.
Okay.
Can I just add that? Because obviously we have the 3 offices and they cover quite a wide area geographically, which is great. But just to say that even where we don't have offices doesn't mean we can't still engage. And we do work very closely with the Foreign Office in London. We work very closely with them. We often brief new heads of mission or new ambassadors before they go out to posts in other countries on Northern Ireland. We arrange study visits for them to come here and find out more about how all the institutions work and what our priorities are. So we do work very closely with them, and there's always that opportunity as well. And we work very closely with our colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs in Dublin too. So here the international relations team can always be a way in. We have channels that we can connect people into as well, and we're always very happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, Brian, please.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair, and thank you all for the work that you're doing, especially those of you overseas. I'm a big supporter of our international connections, and we very much want to see the updated international strategy. It's overdue, and we will monitor the progress of that. So this is something I gave a lot of time to during my 12 years in Belfast City Council. In our sister city, I was Lord Mayor, during my years Lord Mayor, I visited Boston, Nashville and Shenyang, and visited the Northern Ireland bureaus in Beijing and Washington DC, and I very much concur, Carrie, with your comments about the important role that diplomatic relations have in smoothing the path for all those other connections, our business connections, academic connections, and tourism. So it's important to, as in all aspects of life, it's always good to have a good relation, with people, and that enables more to be achieved. So the question I want to ask, and you've covered it already, is in building those international connections, I always think the important thing for government is not to do it all itself. We have a supporting role, but the important thing is to be working with all our partner organisations. You've mentioned about InvestNI. I can't remember the figure now, when I remember hearing how many people we have out in the world promoting Northern Ireland business opportunities, and it was much more than I realised. But working with InvestNI, our universities and colleges, when I was in China, it was with Ulster, Queen's and Belfast Metropolitan College, and they all had partnerships going there. I was at the China Medical University in Shenyang, where people receive Queen's University Belfast medical degrees, and a lot of them come here then to do postgraduate study. So, as I say, working with our universities, sporting bodies, our councils, most of whom have sister cities somewhere in the world, the tourism bodies, arts and cultural groups. So, I know you've touched on this already, but if you want to say a bit more about working with those partner organisations.
Yeah, I might ask Lindsay to say something about that, but I think it's an absolutely fundamental principle here. And there is a huge range of stakeholders. The heads of the office have talked about InvestNI, Tourism NI. They also work very, very closely with British Council, Arts Council, etc. We have spent, I think over the last 2 years, there's been quite a few groups set up and engagements with local government, in particular with the likes of the British Council and others. But I'm not going to say any more, Lindsay, because you've been taking that work forward, and I'm going to give you the chance.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's so much going on actually in terms of international engagement across Northern Ireland. It's really quite impressive, and so many long-standing relationships, like some of the sister city and the civic relationships that have been ongoing for quite a while. I think what we've certainly been trying to do is to put that in the context of how do those relationships help to deliver the objectives that we have, that the councils have, and that the universities have, and how do we actually sort of deliver something with those relationships, and I think that's a very important piece of work that's been ongoing. So in terms of local government, they are often one of the first partners that we have. In Belfast, of course, everybody is generally coming through Belfast at some point in terms of their inward visit, but we're really working with all of the councils to really understand the areas where they have interests, where they would like to see people that have, whether it's an interest in investment or an interest in building relationships, whether those be civic or economic, and trying to match those to inward visits that are coming in. So when we have people coming from particular countries that are expressing an interest in advanced manufacturing or agri-tech or whatever it might be, that we're be able to match them to the relevant councils and have that be part of their visit, really just to help to get that across all of Northern Ireland view as well, so that visitors aren't just always coming to the one place. So I think that's been really important. So we work quite a lot with local government. We have the working group set up with the local government international officers, and sort of a mix of international and economic officers. It meets quarterly. It's been really, really invaluable. In fact, we've really developed quite a lot of good working relationships. Lots of very concrete things have come out of it in terms of working together. that's certainly a very good model, I think, going forward. We mentioned as well before, we've started to work more closely as well with the universities in terms of what they're doing, and actually they're great ambassadors for Northern Ireland internationally as well. And they're, these are some of the big selling points as well for us, is the connection between universities, the further education colleges, the employers. That whole sort of microcosm of relationships here is actually really attractive to lots of people. And I think that's very important as well. We work closely with the British Council too, and with the Arts Council. And I think that brings a different aspect often to the work as well. So that is quite often, British Council will work very closely with the Good Relations team on some things that they're doing, where they're bringing people here to look at how we've been dealing with some of the, from other countries here, to look at how we're addressing some of the challenges and within the communities and what they're doing. And that has actually created quite a few very important partnerships as well, and lots of people learning from us as well as us learning from other people. And I think that's a very important part of the relationships. It's not always us looking to learn from others, but us helping to share our experience in whatever it is that could be of use to others as well. So there's a huge amount of interest in Northern Ireland from that perspective as well. So we really start to see that coming to a good point to say that there's a good understanding and a good working and a good approach across all of those partners. Another area we'll be working very closely, we have 4 consul generals based here that are diplomatic representatives here, based in Northern Ireland, but we also have a network of honorary consuls. There are, I think, over 35 countries perhaps of honorary consuls here, and we started to work very closely with them as well, and they are such a rich seam as well of potential and partnerships, because they're representing their countries here, they're working with them, they're building connections every day, and actually that's been a really important network too, that we meet with them twice a year as well, to give them briefing on what we're doing and to hear from them as well, seeing them at other points. So that's, I think, another very key part of the partnership. You mentioned Invest Northern Ireland. I think at the standing count is 30 offices overseas. I don't have the figure of how many people, but 30 offices, and they have increased their international presence recently. Some of that has been actually through recognising opportunities that are in new markets, and we have certainly been working very closely with them as well. And I know, Tom, you've been working with Invest NI in Singapore and in Tokyo in the last sort of 12-18 months to have joint events to bring together and build partnerships there as well. And I think they're a really important part of that international network, and one that we've always worked closely with both here and abroad, and will continue to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one other wee
Oh yeah, go
comment,
ahead.
Chair. Just briefly, just say to Aidan, just to keep up the running. You're doing great.
Padraig, please. That's you now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, look, thank you firstly for your presentation. I suppose there's 2 points really that I want to touch on. I'm glad so far that you've already mentioned the fact that you're not just kind of bound on by the offices that are there, but you're keen to build relationships with other areas where offices don't exist. And I suppose it's really to return to the European model to start off with. Obviously, if there's an office in Brussels as well, I'd be really keen to hear, particularly after Brexit, how those relationships have changed. We bit more information on that, but also whether or not, obviously in the past when we were operating the Brussels office, it was very much through an EU perspective, and we were operating essentially with all the EU countries on block. So is that still the case? Do we now, because of the implications of Brexit, do we now have to operate with those countries on a one-by-one basis? Are there restrictions on that? So I'm keen to hear a wee bit more information about that. But my second point was just around the data, I suppose, for these offices, and how you measure success. Because these offices, we've heard a lot about the benefits of them, but what are your measurements for success, and how do you actually track that, and I suppose identify what's going really well, where are the gaps, and build on that?
Aidan, do you want to start, please? Go ahead, actually, now.
So, sorry, thank you very much. It's a very good question. I'll let Tom take the second part of the question. But as far as our relationships, well, first to note is that there's an ability for the different offices to support each other. We always talk about the Brussels bubble, the Washington bubble. For example, if Kerry or Vandra are looking to work with people in particular and they have offices here in Brussels, then we can certainly do that sort of pincer movement, work together, and we're definitely stronger by doing that. As far as our relationship with member states is concerned, of course, the EU, the UK has left the EU, so we're no longer sitting on those working parties. We're no longer getting those that information, but that means that we have to work again smarter rather than just harder. We work on policy. We've got 5 policy officers here who work and mirror not only the work of the Commission and the legislative process, but also mirror our 9 departments at home. And that means that we do work with a wide range of the member states, but it's usually on those issues-based items. We will work very closely with the UK mission. The UK mission is obviously interested in a lot of the policy that's made in the EU as well. They will share information with us and vice versa. And as well as that, we will work with the Irish Perm Rep. And again, they have a seat around the table. There's things that they can share with us. But what we've really done over this past couple of years is build really strong relations with the Commission. With the Parliament we always had, but those have become more important. And we, like I said, we've built those policy relationships with member states. Now we are restricted in some of the things that we can do, especially where there are accepted matters that do not fall within our remit. But I'm very proud of what our office has been able to achieve as far as the flow of information, as far as platforming our colleagues within the home departments in Northern Ireland, and also making sure that concerns or information requests are heard by the right people in the Commission and in the member states.
Tom, do you want to take the second part? Or, sorry, Lindsay, be good to go? Sorry.
I was going to say not particularly, but I will take it. It's like any strategy. The base of the current international relations strategy is a 2014 strategy. So when you look at what are your success measures and what are your targets, they reflect the types of strategy you had at that point. They're quite broad. What we're aiming to move to, and this is why I talk about what actually are very specific priorities, is a strategy which is much more focused on being clear as to what success looks like, what we have to do, what the impact of that should be, and that becomes your success measures then of that strategy. Setting that aside, if we look at where we currently are, so we take the Brussels office, and I think as an example of that, a huge focus of the work in the Brussels office over recent years has been in the context of the negotiations between the UK and the EU on the post-Brexit settlement itself. And I think it's fair to say that a key priority of the work that we were doing was to ensure there was a sound understanding, both on the part of the UK and the EU, of issues as they were being seen here by businesses and by communities in Northern Ireland, and that was then being reflected within the negotiations. I think what we've seen come out of that has been certainly a very high level of, I'm trying to think of the right word here, Aidan, but certainly the feedback from both business groups that were engaged, from the Commission and from the EU teams, has been fairly positive on the role that the Bureau played on that one. With regards to China, we've had a particular focus there on MOUs, building relationships between you've talked about the sister city partnerships, for example. So that was part of the success measures in that. We do, as I say, want to get much more specific and much clearer as what do we want to do, what's the next step in that. So I wouldn't, we also have, I think, the Nations Brand Index as well, which we've paid particular attention to, because that's where you're looking at things as to what's the level of awareness of Northern Ireland, how do people see us, is it positive, is it negative? For example, where do we sit on that? And that's quite useful for highlighting which parts of the globe you have particular issues with where you're perceived well, where there's good understanding, where there's not, how does that relate back into the areas that we ourselves are actually trying to target? I don't know, Lindsay, anything you want to say on that?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the Nations Brand Index, but we've been, Northern Ireland has been included since 2016, and it does look across, it looks at the international image and reputation of 60 nations across 6 dimensions of national competence, which are exports, governance, culture, people, tourism, and immigration and investment. And the 2023 findings for Northern Ireland, we maintained our sort of mid-level ranking of 25th out of 60 nations, but we also achieved an all-time high score of 61.62 out of 100. So we're really in the top half of nations there in terms of, despite having the second smallest population of the 60 nations that are included in the index. So this is really, and very important for us just to see where we sit and how we're perceived. It has some very interesting results, but what it really shows you as well is how we're perceived in different countries, but also across those 6 areas that I mentioned. Our highest rank in 2023 was from the United States, which is not surprising given the sort of visibility of Northern Ireland there, but closely followed by France and Italy. So that it's not necessarily, let's say, those very precise maybe KPIs of what the offices are delivering, but it does show where international engagement overall, of which the offices are an incredibly important part, is having an impact.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Carrie. Oh, sorry, Carrie was going to come in first.
Just to touch on that from the China Bureau perspective, and I think probably we're all in the space where we're trying to move from outputs to outcomes. Yep. And I think part of the role of our offices overseas, it is in that very much diplomatic partnership influencing space. So while we can look at outcomes such as increased exports to a country, that isn't an outcome that can be attributable to TEO or TEO staff, but we can have been very influential in supporting that activity to take place, not least looking at the work of the Brussels office during this preceding 5 to 8 year period in enabling sort of the trade in the region. But it is important that we still measure those areas and look at how that changes over time, and looking at trend lines in relation to our outputs versus the outcomes. And that's something that I'll be looking to do within the China Bureau, so that we've got some measurable, if not directly attributable impacts, that we can say this is something that, as Northern Ireland, working collaboratively in partnership together, have achieved in this region.
Okay, Padraig.
Okay, so yeah, Chair, thank you. So definitely, I mean, I appreciate there are a lot of factors here. There's a myriad of factors around it, really. But I think having that statistical data, particularly for the EU, and I suppose why I raise that point really is to measure, from Brexit on, the impact that has actually had on trade, on those other KPIs that you've mentioned as well. So for me, while it's not, I suppose, the only index of monitoring, it's definitely a useful one, and particularly from 2016 onwards in assessing that. So I'm just wondering, Chair, if we can maybe appreciate you are unlikely to have the figures to hand, but I think it'd be really useful for the committee if those figures could be sent on, particularly for the European office from 2016 onwards, just so that we could actually monitor, around trade, around those other things, and obviously there's a committee really which focuses a lot more on that than we do, but I think it's really essential to our work that we have that information as well. So thank you for your answers, really comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to come back to that at the end, Padraig, so thank you, because I was going to ask a question around like what annual reports you have to submit against the value for money measurement as well, in terms of, because Tommy didn't give us an actual figure, so we do actually want to have that, because I do think that we as a committee have to scrutinise that it's actually in a very competing, very financially constrained situation we're in right now. We need to make sure that this money's been well spent. Sinead, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's lovely to see the 3 bureaus here and giving evidence and briefing the committee. this afternoon. Obviously, I mean, a key part of the work is building relationships and that public diplomacy and greeting and meeting people. And I know that the Washington Bureau does a lot of work with the Washington Ireland programme as well. So there's a lot of engagement there for young leaders of tomorrow, which is really important. However, I would say, just reading over the briefing that you've given us, it points to a lot of activity, absolutely, without a doubt, and it's done on a shoestring, and there's very few bodies actually involved in the international team. But there is that lack of outcomes that has already been referred to in the previous question, and I think that that is something that we really need to concentrate on going forward. For example, so the last strategy was 2014. Okay, there's been a refresh, but the world significantly has changed from that, and we need to enter a different kind of mode of operandi in terms of going forward. And again, what kind of engagements, or what has your engagements changed because of the Windsor framework, and how you are engaging internationally in your various offices in selling that dual market access, and what more can be done in regards to that. Now, I know that you're working with InvestNI, but there is that diplomacy part that is key to that as well. So if I could just kind of knot those two together, that the fact that the world has changed, and how have you changed to meet those needs?
Go ahead, Andrew, do you want to go first? Is that you now? Go ahead.
I think these are really important questions, and somebody mentioned earlier on about the role of the overseas offices as enablers. I think that's a really important point to make. So certainly, as head of a small office, I find myself constantly with multiple things going on and happening at once. And when it comes to the choice between measuring and doing, I tend to lean towards the doing, and that's because people for hundreds of years have been trying to work out how you actually measure outcomes in relation to diplomacy. And I don't know, I think we could do it for another 100 years, and we'd probably never come out with really good outcomes in that respect. But what I would say is this, if an office like mine can secure at relatively short notice high-level access for First Minister and Deputy First Minister, with, for example, as we did this year with the US Chamber of Commerce, the top business organization in the United States, and its leading companies for First Minister and Deputy First Minister can arrange for the Economy Minister to be there too, can arrange for InvestNI to be there, can arrange for Joe Kennedy to be there, pull all that together and have the backing of State Department to make sure that there's an excellent attendance from businesses. That's an indicator of success, and that happened this year in March. And we had a really good session where First Minister and Deputy First Minister were really very, very actively able to capture the benefits of the access to more than one market, the dual access thing, and other benefits of investing in Northern Ireland and trading with Northern Ireland and engaging in research and development with Northern Ireland in partnership. So I think those are the kinds of things that really stack up in terms of actual measurements, is what are we actually able to do when a stakeholder comes out and we have the opportunity to build meetings for them and engagements.
Go ahead, Kerry.
So I suppose when you looked at how the world has changed from the perspective of China and Asia Pacific, it's changed hugely, not just in 10 years, but probably in the past 2 years. Post-COVID, things have changed too. Policies at a government level have changed in the region, and the work that I'm doing at the moment is trying to assess how do we work within that new environment. So look into what China's policies are in terms of export and import growth, and from what regions, how they utilise their levels of interest, frankly, in the Windsor framework, given the size of their economy. and discussions. I'm having discussions currently with the Director General at the China Consulate, but also with my staff out in Beijing about how we look to the messaging around the dual market access, looking at locations within Northern Ireland and selling into UK and EU in relation to the sectors that China very specifically is looking to export into that region. So there's a bit of work to be done with that. But I would actually have to say that given the size of the economies, we are getting messages back that while for some sectors and some sizes of companies, there will be interest in the opportunities presented by the Windsor Framework, and Invest and I have done an awful lot of work in pulling those messages together. Also, because of the size of the companies in terms of their general international engagement, the Windsor Framework and the dual market access won't be the deciding factor. It'll be our skills, it'll be what we're able to offer on the ground, it'll be our infrastructure, the access to officials and to other partners within their supply chain. So just to be clear that the Windsor Framework is part of the cell and definitely is in there, but there's so many other aspects of the Northern Ireland package that for its success as a selling tool on its own will be determined by the nature of the business, the size of the business, and really what they're trying to achieve while working with us.
I think it's a really, really important point. And if we go back to last year with engagement we were having with in Tokyo, primarily, the questions we were getting asked in the Windsor Framework reflected the fact that it came on the back of a period of negotiation, both on the Windsor Framework and then the UK discussions on the FTA. Where Northern Ireland's unique position was being perceived as a problem in those negotiations because you still had unresolved issues. So there's a period there where you're addressing that issue about turning around what's a relatively negative perception of Northern Ireland into a more positive one, working with Invest NI. Well, once we've got to there, what are the kind of questions that you're starting to get on the Windsor Framework? And they become very, very specific. How does this type of business get access to the skills, the employees, the supply chains, etc.? And that's a different series of questions. What I would say, looking at the success, is after that initial engagement with Japan, I think we did have a high-level Japanese delegation across in Belfast within 6-8 weeks. It was very, 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 very shortly after that, and we've had further engagement from Japan. Okay. Now, it might take time for that to actually pan out into specific, but you can see the interest is there, and that's been part of the purpose of the engagement. If I went back, Sinead, in terms of the value for money, etc., everything that the Bureau do is subject to a kind of post-evaluation on that, which looks at, well, what did we achieve? Did we achieve what we aimed to? Did we secure value for money for that? I think when we look forward, there's a recognition that we do have to take a step back with other stakeholders and look at, are we necessarily targeting all our activities towards those key priorities? So not just individually are they value for money, but collectively are they delivering the type of value for money that we would need to see? And again, that's going back to the strategy piece. I agree with Andrew, it's very, very hard to identify a set of key KPIs in that diplomacy space, but what we can do is ensure that the outputs that we have there are very clearly aligned to the strategic objectives, and we're able to demonstrate exactly why we're doing them.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I just want to ask one more question on that. So I'm kind of looking at that global picture and how the world has changed. But Tom, can I ask you, how is our international relations approach tailored to areas of specific and unique opportunity? For example, the Northwest City region.
Yeah. I'm probably going to bring Lindsay on that one, Sinead, but it's part of, I've been involved in the Northwest City region work now for, it's 8 years, I think, okay? And one of the key things there, you've seen a lot of development over the years, particularly in the closer work between Invest NI and IDA and the sort of promotion of the area itself. But back to Lindsay's point in terms of developing the strategy for international relations, a key part of that has been the discussion and the engagement with councils. We certainly we've had some very, very positive discussions, engagement with councils, which are starting to get down to where do you see your specific priorities. In the Northwest, I mean, you'll be aware of the work obviously that's going on there at a local level to look at what's the proposition, what's the strengths, what's the ambition. That obviously would tie into the work which DFE are also doing on the local, call it economic strategies or plans, which the Minister has set out. So I am very, very clear, we are very clear that your international relations strategy would have to take account of that work. Not a lot more I can say at this minute in time for Nate, other than those partnerships and relationships are there. Okay.
I mean, obviously the Executive Office has a key role to play there in terms of the Northwest Cross-Border Partnership Group, and obviously if the TEO office or the TEO is looking at the international relationships, you know, it's all within the same space, and it's really important that they're well connected and well coordinated, and obviously that there follows through to the Department for Economy as well.
Yeah.
Okay, that's everything from us. Any last comments or no?
No, I'd just like to say thank you very much. There are a lot of points there I think we can take back and look at how do we address those within the emergence strategy itself. Yeah. And I do look forward at some point coming back in the not too distant future to talk to you about the emergence strategy.
Well, we look forward to hearing from that, and all the best in your role when you actually get out there. And thank you to Aidan and Andrew, and keep up the good work. It was good to see you online today. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we've got one more oral evidence session today, and it's on the June monitoring round. So you'll find the clerk's brief at page 30, and on page 9 of the table pack you'll find the departmental briefing paper. Page 18 of the table pack is the tackling paramilitarism bid. Page 20 of the table pack, the good relations TBUC transformation bid. Page 21 of the table pack, the delivery unit transformation fund bid. Page 22 the table pack, arm's length body pension and pressures bid. Page 25 the Windsor framework bid, and page 29 the SIB FTC capitalised loan interest bid. Okay, so we've got 3 witnesses today.
Get the door.
Sorry, yes, please. I'll just give one more glass.
Okay. Okay, here we go. So Gareth Johnson is here. He's the accounting officer at the Executive Office, and we've got Ronan Murda, Finance Director at the Executive Office, and we've Paula Shearer, who is the head of budgeting branch at the Executive Office. So you're all very welcome. Welcome back, some of you, and I would invite you to make some opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Many thanks to the committee for allowing us to meet today and to provide an update on TEO finance matters and an overview of the June monitoring submission. We've just got a brief opening statement to allow time. We've provided a briefing paper on June monitoring in advance of the committee, as we're required to do, but hopefully that will have been helpful to the members. At our last attendance on the 24th of April and in the papers provided since the meeting, the committee will be aware that, like all other departments, TEO was not allocated the full funding requested in the budget 24-25 allocations, and the outlook continues to be extremely challenging. In response to our non-earmarked resource bids of 7.5 million, we received an allocation of 1 million. And in response to our earmarked resource bids for victims payments, HIA and truth recovery of 128.5 million, we were allocated only 100 million. However, this did come with a recognition from the Finance Minister that it was an executive priority and that bids should be brought forward during the year were firm need was identified. And as previously highlighted, this represents the greatest percentage of the TEO budget. As the allocation is earmarked for these purposes, it can't be used to offset pressures in any other aspect of the budget. These areas are demand-led and traditionally difficult to predict with certainty. I should note that to any of those who are applying to the redress scheme shouldn't worry about these allocations. It's a legal obligation in terms of making the payments, and this is essentially a back office function of balancing the books in terms of the timing of need. I should note too that the Finance Minister is continuing to press the UK Government on their contributions to victims' payments funding. For Capital Dell, we were allocated 10.5 million in response to bids of 14.5 million. And in terms of actions to live within baseline, the application of the additional £1 million resource and 10.5 million capital allocation, we're working with ministers to agree plans for the year ahead, and options are before them at present. We start the year with an overcommitment as previously advised and are taking actions to manage this as set out in the briefing paper. Without baselining the 23-24 pay agreement and with increased delivery expectations combined with inflation, this means we have an extremely challenging outlook. We have conducted the June monitoring exercise in line with DOF guidance. As a result of Westminster allocations, we're aware that additional resource is available, but demands across departments will, I would expect, significantly outweigh the amounts available. We've taken the opportunity to submit resource bids totalling 11.5 million as set out in the paper, and these aim to address reductions to frontline delivery, improve efficiencies and better ways of working, and address pressures within our arm's length bodies. Other areas remain subject to fluctuations in demand, such as victims and survivors, or will be areas of future demand, for example, rights, language and identity, and we've advised DOF that these are likely to represent future bids during the year. We're happy to take any questions or provide further clarification.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your papers. In terms of the actual bids that we were supplied, do you know what strikes me about them? There's very little information in them. Okay, so you have these big boxes that the departmental officials no doubt have to put information in, and I just want to pick up on a couple of them. So there was a bid went in there for the Delivery Unit Transformation Fund, and the question was, how does the bid contribute to the achievement of departmental targets and draft PFG targets? And that big box, there's one line and it says, Delivery Unit Transformation dash, this work will be used to set future PFG targets. I mean, how are you measuring? How are you actually using these forms to actually make informed decisions in terms of whether money should go? And I'll give you a couple of other examples. So there was one there for communities in transition, and it said evidence from a number of independent sources has supported CIT activity to build community resilience, to reduce vulnerability of paramilitarism and coercive control across 8 areas. But it doesn't give a list of what those independent sources are. And how are you measuring external to these independent sources the impact of this Communities in Transition programme whenever we can still see the paramilitary flags and still see evidence of coercive control from paramilitaries in these communities? And just one last one. In terms of good relations projects, you're bidding for £500,000, and you're saying there it'll ultimately reduce the cost of division. And where is the evidence of that? So this is public money that obviously somebody is writing these bids to ask for more money, and I have to say, if they were in front of me, as somebody who was in the community voluntary sector for 19 years and would have had to put reams and reams of paper in for a £5,000 grant, I mean, it is so scant.
And I suppose we're dealing with the Department of Finance, to whom these forms go, with a supply team who know a lot about the ongoing work of the department, and so they're written in that context. If we were writing something for a wider audience, we'd certainly write it differently. In terms of a couple of things you've mentioned, communities in transition, for an independent assessment of that. I can point to the recent report of the Independent Reporting Commission, which has been very positive about the outcomes that it's seen at community level from CIT's work. It, in its past reports, has acknowledged that as a project it took a little while to find its feet. But now that it has been targeted on very specific areas in each of the geographical areas where it operates, which have an impact on paramilitary control in those areas. I was up in North Belfast at the Ashton Centre and seeing the work that they've done as a social supermarket and about illegal money lending. And I was in the Rathgill estate as well in Bangor and meeting some of the senior citizens group there that's been doing peer education on illegal money lending and spreading the message about other ways of managing debt and other ways. So those are the kind of impacts that it's been having.
I'm not necessarily disputing that. I'm saying we're a scrutiny committee. You provided us with copies of the monitoring bids. There was half a sentence in some cases in terms of there's a lack of transparency there in terms of how these decisions are being made, and that's really my point. I'm not disputing some individual projects are actually doing a good job, but you're making assertions in these monitoring bid forms that are going that there's no backup within the boxes that have been provided.
We've given you the bids as they were put to DOF. Maybe for the future there's something about for the committee giving a bit more background and pointing to some of the things which DOF are maybe more familiar with, but aware that we're speaking to a different audience.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I would appreciate if you could take that back. In terms of there's a bid has gone in there under the Capital Dell for the Beijing lease for 363,000. So I'm just wondering, could you speak to that a bit? Because obviously we just heard from that lady, and I didn't want to ask her because she's literally just in the job 5 weeks. But that's a lot of money's being spent in that office. If you could just speak to that bit.
Well, the capital element in terms of what is needed because of the accounting standards will end up being the equivalent of the capital representation of the full premises being leased. So the lease will be paid over a period of time, but there's a need to capitalise the element of the capital value of the premises that are going to be occupied.
Okay, and I suppose the other questions just maybe sitting outside that, and it's about the Ebrington story today, and you maybe aren't across the detail, but just in terms of the value for money of the money that's being spent on some of these sites, I'm just wondering if you could speak maybe to what's in the news today, if possible.
We are already at the point in Ebrington where the investment of the investment in the site has been considerably more than the public sector investment in the site. So when you add up what the private sector has invested in terms of the development of the Grade A office accommodation, in terms of the hotel, in terms of the cafes and restaurants and so on. I mean, all right, in some of those cases we were providing the shell of the building, but what they have then invested capital-wise and in revenue, it very much exceeds the public sector investment. I think the aim, and as we do our projections through, the aim would be that once the site is complete, there would be about a 4-to-1 gearing of private sector and outside investment that has been enabled. 4 of those that has been enabled by one of the government investment in the site.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Connie, Deputy Chair.
Thanks. Just 2 points I want to pick up on what Paula said on that office, the bureau in China. There's been considerable money spent on that. I assume that's not a new office. That office has been there for a long time. Do you think that's good value for money to spend money on that lease when we haven't seen any output? There's nothing on the TEO website. We can't even find a website for it on its own, the way there's one for Brussels, and Washington. You can't find the address. I just wonder, with how much do we get out of that office that we're putting into it?
We certainly keep those international offices under review, and I don't know if colleagues earlier had an opportunity to comment on this, but of course we're looking not just to China, but we're looking more widely in the Far East, and there are big opportunities in our relationship with Singapore and Malaysia and so on for businesses here. The costs reflect the costs of of doing business in China, and it's not even that, because I think property is allocated by the Chinese government, it's not even that we could kind of shop around and look for others. So if you're going to have the office, that's what it's going to cost. In the case of China, value for money and the impact of the office would be more a question for international relations colleagues, but certainly the reports I've seen about the links that have been made, not just in Beijing, but in particular regions that would have a relevance to here. I mean, for a small team, there has been a lot of connections made with Chinese officials regionally, with industry, but keep all of this under review, and the review that is colleagues are looking at of international relations, they may well have said something about it earlier, will look at what is appropriate for the future in China and the Far East.
The lease, of course, renewal of any lease will be subject to business case scrutiny, and value for money will be tested at that point. So, and would be brought to Department of Finance in terms of any property leases. And I suppose, as Gareth says, it would be tied into the international strategy, international relations strategy, in terms of the presence, the question of a presence.
My understanding is the current lease expires in October, so this will be the signing of a new lease.
I just would really question, we have seen very, very little, there's very little in the public domain about what's been happening in that office. Your own website has nothing on there since 2017. The Twitter account hasn't tweeted since 2019, and the website, there's nothing on it. It's I don't know how this office can reach out and make connections if there's so little known about it. But I do want to ask another question, and that's on non-earmarked resource allocation. And I understand a bid of £500,000 for the End of Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. Could you just tell me then, is that in total of what's been allocated to the EVOG strategy, or is that as well as money already allocated?
That was an additional bid that was put in, so that's part of the proposals that are with ministers for decisions at the moment. So it was wrapped up in the 7.5 million total that was bid for at the start of the year. We've received 1 million. That's not specific towards any individual bids. That's over to ministers really to decide how funds would be allocated, and those are the spending plans that are with ministers at the moment.
You can't give us any indication of how that will be spent until that's signed off?
No.
Okay. That's fine.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. So is it the new delivery, the central delivery unit? What is that?
I acknowledge what the chair said, that there wasn't a great deal of detail in the bid, and that reflects simply the fact that it's a bit of a placeholder for now, in that there is more thought being given to the potential of a central delivery unit. If you look across to the Taoiseach's office, if you look to Scotland, and there have been various iterations of this in Westminster as well. They're called different things, but there have been delivery units that have been very much about supporting, in their case, the Cabinet, in our case, the Executive, in the range of things that it aims to do collectively. So the idea of a delivery unit, and it would be drawing on a number of things that TEO already does, but building on that and adding to it. The idea of a delivery unit was to work with departments to make sure that the programme for government was implemented, because it was a collective ambition of the Executive.
So is this really just, this is like what we're doing is we're just allocating money on the basis that there's going to be a new delivery unit whenever a programme for government's agreed?
Yeah, I mean, the ministers still have to consider advice on what delivery units look like in other places, what exactly one might look like here. So, as I say, it was more a concept and a placeholder that was going in for now. But there is, for example, when you look across in the Audit Office's review of infrastructure, major capital projects, and there are concerns there about how effective government's delivery is in infrastructure. There's potential for us to lean into a number of these areas, and very much lean into the transformation agenda as well.
Okay, so then in relation to the Strategic Investment Board, which is supposed to look after, well actually it's not, it gives advice and guides, but so how does the Strategic Investment Board fit into this? Because one of the things I seen was that there was financial transactions capital of 1.2 million in loans going to Queen's University and Ulster University, investment fund loans. What are those for?
They only go through our books because the departments concerned and Department of Finance didn't have the power to make those loans directly. So as a stopgap measure, they went through the Strategic Investment Board and through the department's books. In the financial provisions bill, which
sorry,
is
are they for capital or revenue?
Yeah, it's specific Treasury funding that can only be used towards strategic and capital investment.
Mm-hmm. So after the overspend in Ulster University, they're getting a loan?
I say...
So maybe, sorry,
yes.
It's unfair to ask, is that it's just that to back up what Paula, the chair, had said, it's just a statement on our page, but there's no narrative behind it, so maybe if you could find that out. And my last question is, in relation to the Commissioner's offices, how much money has been set aside for those?
On those,
in the language bodies, is that? Yeah.
Not the language bodies, because that's communities, it's the Commissioners which come under TEO.
In terms of the Commissioners, that will represent, as I was saying at the introductory, it will represent the subsequent bid, because at the moment the funding that exists within the department is purely for within the department's preparatory works, but not for the organisations themselves. That'll be subject to decisions of ministers, the plans that would be approved and the nature of the funding that would be provided. So we flagged that to DOF that we would be coming back to, once plans are formed on that front, that we would be coming back with a subsequent bid on that.
Outside of the June monitoring round?
Yeah.
So has the business cases been done?
Business case has been through Department of Finance, but the decisions on budgets have yet to be made. There's a process to be gone through. So ministers have seen an initial submission on the appointments and have reached some agreements there. We are now coming back to them in terms of setting up the panels now for the appointments. We will then come back to ministers from those panels with the candidate information booklets, the criteria, all the detail around the appointments.
So financially, all that's covered.
The preparation of all of that is covered. The advertising,
all that's covered.
Yeah.
So there's no impediment there.
Yeah.
So it's really just how the three commissioners' offices will run, and the setup costs for that.
And decisions on those haven't been made as yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just follow up on Carol's point there around that delivery unit transformation fund bid? So in your paper to us, you say that the June monitoring, the in-year monitoring process provides a formal system for reviewing spending plans and priorities in this financial year in light of the most up-to-date position. Would it not be better to put that bid in at a later stage when you were further along in the process of setting this up?
And I expect it could well go in again in the future.
As an underspend, but it's not set up. It'll be an underspend.
Well, at this stage, there's nothing set up in terms of a delivery unit,
Is that not the point of the in-year monitoring, that you actually you have a pressure or a need in this next sort of 3 to 4 months that you could be spending?
Monitoring bids can be prospective, in that there are things you anticipate you will be spending as the year goes on, and so you bid for them. And there was encouragement from the Department of Finance in terms of the monitoring bids for us to look at transformation delivery, anything that might be a transformation bid in the future, which was why it was registered. Now, I recognise there's not a lot of detail around it. What I was trying to say was there is a very specific need that a delivery unit can fulfil in terms of enabling transformation in the future, but obviously we would expect that down the line, not too far down the line, there will be much more specific proposals about what exactly that would look like. Indeed, it's one of the things that I know the incoming Permanent Secretary is going to be tasked with.
Thank you. Carol, is that you done? Yes. Thank you. Harry, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ronan, in terms of finances, you said issues, and you'd said that present you were working on demand led. So what would you say is the biggest demand at present, right now?
In terms of demand led areas, it's victims, the victim side in terms of victims payments. The last year as we enter in terms of historical institutional abuse, in terms of assessing the demand for the claims as that scheme comes to a close. And then also the ramping up and the developments in terms of truth recovery. So the victim side is the biggest area of demand-led nature, the most volatile, and indeed, as we've mentioned to the committee previously, there is thankfully a very much appreciated facility with Department of Finance where we can pull those lines, and because they are unpredictable in terms of choices that will be made and determinations that will be received from the schemes, we're able to offset pressures and easements across the three lines.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Brian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. 3 questions I want to ask. First of all, 2 about urban villages. In paragraph 9 or section 9, we're told, last sentence, small easements have been identified for urban villages. Does that mean underspend, basically? Yep. But is the commitment to those projects still in place, or does that mean projects have been lost? There's some outstanding projects in North Belfast, so I'm hoping this is just maybe it didn't happen within one financial year.
Yes. No, in terms of those capital developments, and thinking about the Lockhouse project and thinking about the ABC, am I using the right but thinking about those health and leisure facilities and so on that are
in playing fields, and there's a centre at Sunningdale and so on, and Westland hopefully is still been advanced.
Any of those capital projects that were in the programme are still in the programme. Inevitably, there's a bit of management from one year to another. Construction spend, how much gets built, how long planning takes. But no, the construction projects are still
Okay.
on the books.
Okay, well, that's good. And I know the new community centre for Westland, last time I checked, didn't have a specific budget allocated yet, but I hope that will get a budget allocated to it in due course. Also then on point 25, under capital DEL, it says requirements for urban villages in Ebrington will be kept under review. Is that referring to a potential future phase of urban villages, or is that just is that saying in case budgets change,
yes,
costs change,
and needs change? Yes, precisely.
Right. So
Precisely
we don't know at this stage. There's no decision regarding a future phase of urban villages.
No, not as yet. There are options with ministers about thinking about an urban villages stage 2, but no, that just refers to managing the current programme, which can fluctuate.
Yeah, I know how construction costs can vary at the moment.
Indeed.
Okay, and finally, Chair, you mentioned previously when you were in, Gareth, yourself, about funding from other sources, not DOF funding that comes through TEO. I know you've match funding for EU Peace Plus, for example, there. I don't know if you can give a figure, but in terms of funding either coming directly from Westminster or EU sources, do you have a figure for funding non-DOF funding that comes through the department?
Primarily those would be refugees and asylum seekers funding, and we don't have figures for those.
We're waiting on the Home Office to confirm the full dispersal funding that comes to us. I've been pressing them, but we haven't had final confirmation as yet.
Yeah. I know we're one of the smaller departmental budgets, but it is augmented
it is vital, I have to say, and I met the second permanent secretary at the Home Office a few weeks ago and emphasised that funding really is vital for the services that we provide, and also urged that because it works very much on a year-by-year basis and it's never entirely certain what we're going to get, could we not put it on a more sustainable basis, so that we had a clear amount to work to every year.
Did I interrupt you, Paul?
Sorry, no, we did receive some funding from HMT for Windsor Framework, about 1.3 million this year, and we received some for communities in transition as well.
Directly from Treasury?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any members online like to ask a question? Don't see any indications. No. Just a question. Just want to come back to something you said there, Gareth, about the lack of a permanent secretary within the department. Is there any update you can provide us, or is that up to ministers?
No, and there is a formal notification about this that's on its way to the committee. But David Malcolm, Deputy Secretary in the Department for the Economy, has been appointed as interim permanent secretary. That's expected to be for a 6 to 9 month kind of period. David is going to be joining us on Monday, and I know one of the things Colette has been in touch just so that we can see how we can best loop David into the committee after he arrives.
Is he in DFC?
He was in the past, yes. So he has quite a bit of experience right across all the different bits of government, yes, indeed.
Okay, well, thank you. Go ahead, Ronan.
Could I just make one point, maybe just a clarification, if it's helpful, for FTC?
Mm-hmm.
That FTC is for capitalised interest, so it's not a new loan that it's talking about, so it's not more money
Didn't
going
say
out.
that in your papers.
Apologies, it's clarification needed. Apologies.
Those
No, as
details.
it says capitalised interest, so apologies.
No,
I should be
I just,
clarifying all of
I
it.
didn't know. Honestly, I'm not trying to be clever. It's just you could take anything out of that and run with it, and we don't want to do that. We want to try and scrutinise what's actually happening.
And hopefully it'll be the last year that FTC appears in our accounts if the financial financial provisions bill goes through. That will give the other departments the powers that they need.
Unless you want to build community infrastructure.
I am sure that if there are bids for community infrastructure that would fit with the terms of FTC, that they'd certainly be considered by the relevant departments.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that today.
Well done, Gareth.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again. So, members, we are going to look at the draft forward work programme. You'll find it page 33 of your meeting pack. We're going to have a session on the donation of bodies for anatomical study, and that was meant to be planned for next week, organised at short notice because we rescheduled Ebrington. Queen's University have advised that it's too short notice to move commitments of the individuals concerned, and have asked to come back at a later date. So are we content to schedule that for a later date?
Okay.
I do nothing else.
Oh.
I know. Okay, but it means then next week's session will be quite a short one. We'll have just two witnesses, but I'm sure we'll. Three. Oh, sorry. There's two panels. There's a two and a one. Okay. In terms of correspondence, then page 41 of your pack and page 33 of your tail pack will give a summary of the committee correspondence. Would anybody like to note any correspondence? No. Okay. That's our meeting over. Thanks very much, everyone. See you here next week.
Thank you.